of our 365-day Bible read. Today we're going to be reading, I was about to say Exodus again. We're going to be reading Leviticus chapters 10, 11, and 12. And we're going to be reading Matthew chapter 26, verse 1 through 19, and then we'll do the Bible study for Leviticus chapters 10, 11, and 12, and Matthew chapter 26. Actually, we're not going to do the Bible study for what we read today of Matthew chapter 26. We're just going to wait until tomorrow when we do when we finish up the chapter by reading verse 20 through 54 tomorrow, and then we'll just do the Bible study for the entire chapter instead of just splitting it up. Because when I do it that way, I notice that the next day when I do the Bible study for like the half of the chapter that we read, I notice that I wind up like reading all of everything from the Bible study from the day before. So I'm like, I'm just gonna wait and just do it all in one day. So yes, all right, we're going to get started. We had a busy day today. All of my days have been really, really busy, but we had a busy day. The worker was here. We bought a new vanity for our bathroom and like a new countertop and well, the countertop had a sink like already like built in, but so we had to like take the old one out and get the new one installed in. And yes, it was just hectic all day today. And me and the kids went out to get out of the way. So it was just like, oof. Anyways, but it looks really good. They did a really good job. Yeah, it looks really good. So yes, but anyways, so we're gonna get started here with Leviticus chapter 10. And yeah, we'll get going. Leviticus chapter 10. The death of Nadab and Abihu. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord has said. Among those who are near me, I will be sanctified, and before all the people I will be glorified." And Aaron held his peace. And Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, uncle of Aaron, and said to them, "Come near, carry your brothers away from the front of the sanctuary and out of the camp." So they came near and carried them and their coats out of the camp, as Moses had said. And Moses said to Aaron and to and to and to Eleazar and Ithamar, his sons, "Do not let the hair of your heads hang loose, and do not tear your clothes, lest you die, and wrath come upon all the congregation. But let your brothers, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning that the Lord has kindled. And do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die. For the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you." And they did according to the word of Moses. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, "Drink no wine or strong drink, you or your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. You are to distinguish between the holy and the common, and between the unclean and the clean. And you are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes that the Lord has spoken to them by Moses. Moses spoke to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar, his surviving sons. Take the grain offering that is left of the Lord's food offerings, and eat it unleavened beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in a holy place, because it is your due and your son's due from the Lord's food offerings. For so I am commanded. But the breast that is waved and the thigh that is contributed, you shall eat in a clean place, you and your sons and your daughters with you. For they are given as your due and your sons' due from the sacrifices of the peace offerings of the people of Israel. The thigh that is contributed and the breast that is waved, they shall bring with the food offerings of the fat pieces to wave for a wave offering before the Lord. And it shall be yours and your sons with you as a due forever, as the Lord has commanded. Now Moses diligently inquired about the goat of the sin offering, and behold, it was burned up. And he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the surviving sons of Aaron, saying, Why have you not eaten the sin offering in the place of the sanctuary? Since it is a thing most holy and has been given to you, that you may bear the iniquity of the congregation to make atonement for them before the Lord. Behold, its blood was not brought into the inner part of the sanctuary. You certainly ought to have eaten it in the sanctuary as I commanded. And Aaron said to Moses, Behold, today they have offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord. And yet such things as these have happened to me. If I had eaten the sin offering today, would the Lord have approved? And when Moses heard that, he approved. Leviticus chapter 11. Clean and unclean animals. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, These are the living things that you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. Whatever parts the hoof and is cloven footed, and chews the cud among the animals, you may eat. Nevertheless, among those that chew the cud or part the hoof, you shall not eat these. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the rock badger, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the hare, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the pig, because it parts the hoof and is cloven footed but does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. You shall not eat any of their flesh, and you shall not touch their carcasses. They are unclean to you. These you may eat of all that are in the waters. Everything in the waters that has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, you may eat. But anything in the seas or the rivers that does not have fins and scales, of the swarming creatures in the waters and of the living creatures that are in the waters, is detestable to you. You shall regard them as detestable. You shall not eat any of their flesh, and you shall detest their carcasses. Everything in the waters that does not have fins and scales is detestable to you. And these you shall detest among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are detestable. The eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon of any kind, every raven of any kind, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, the cormorant, the short-eared owl, the barn owl, sorry, the tawny owl, the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, the hoopoe, I never heard of that, the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged insects that go on all fours are detestable to you. Yet among the winged insects that go on all fours, you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet, with which to hop on the ground. Of them you may eat the locust of any kind, the bald locust of any kind, the cricket of any kind, and the grasshopper of any kind. But all other winged insects that have 4 feet are detestable to you. And by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening, and whoever carries any part of their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every animal that parts the hoof, but is not cloven footed, or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Everyone who touches them shall be unclean. And all that walk on their paws among the animals that go on all fours are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening. And he who carries their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the swarming things that swarm on the ground: the mole rat, the mouse, the great lizard of any kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that swarm. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until the evening. And anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it is an article of wood or a garment or a skin or a sack, any article that is used for any purpose. It must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the evening, then it shall be clean. And if any of them falls into any earthenware vessel, all that is in it shall be unclean, and you shall break it. Any food in it that could be eaten, on which water comes, shall be unclean. And all drink that could be drunk from every such vessel shall be unclean. And everything on which any part of their carcass falls shall be unclean. Whether oven or stove, it shall be broken in pieces. They are unclean and shall remain unclean for you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern holding water shall be clean, but whoever touches a carcass in them shall be unclean. And if any part of their carcass falls upon any seed grain that is to be sown, it is clean. But if water is put on the seed and any part of their carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. And if any animal which you may eat dies, whoever touches its carcass shall be unclean until the evening. And whoever eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. And whoever carries the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every swarming thing that swarms on the ground is detestable. It shall not be eaten. Whatever goes on its belly, and whatever goes on all fours, or whatever has many feet, any swarming thing that swarms on the ground, you shall not eat, for they are detestable. You shall not make yourselves detestable with any swarming thing that swarms, and you shall not defile yourselves with them, and become unclean through them. For I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourselves with any swarming thing that crawls on the ground. For I am the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law about beast and bird and every living creature that moves through the waters and every creature that swarms on the ground, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that may be eaten and the living creature that may not be eaten. Okay, Leviticus chapter 12. Purification after childbirth. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, If a woman conceives and bears a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As at the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Then she shall continue for 33 days in the blood of her purifying. She shall not touch anything holy, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying are completed. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, and as in her menstruation. And she shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 66 days. And when the days of her purifying are completed, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb, a year old, for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. And he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her. Then she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law of her who bears a child, either male or female. And if she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. Whew. Aren't we blessed that we do not have to follow these laws of the Old Testament anymore, since the New Testament and Jesus came along? So, whew, Lord have mercy. But that was Leviticus chapter 10, 11, and 12. And we're now going to do the Bible study for Leviticus chapter 10, 11, and 12, what we just read. And sorry for the noise, but our baby monitor is it's low, the battery's low, but I have to listen out for the babies just in case someone wakes up, so it's just gonna beep. But so yes, let's get started. Leviticus chapter 10, 11, and 12 Bible study. And then after this, we're going to go on over to the New Testament, to Matthew chapter 26, and read verse 1 through 19. And we're not going to do any Bible study until tomorrow for it, because we're going to finish Matthew chapter 26 by reading verse 20 through 54, I believe it goes to chapter 26. Oh, okay, there's more. So this one is split up into three. So this one's gonna be split up into 3 days. So yeah, that's why we're on the book of Matthew for so long, because they split the chapters up. Because literally after chapter 26, we only have 2 more chapters to read, but we'll probably be reading still Matthew, getting through for like another week, even though we only have 2 more chapters to read of it after we finish chapter 26. So yeah, it's how ESV.org splits them up. I'm just following their schedule. So yeah, so I'm not splitting the chapters up. They are, and I'm just following their schedule on ESV.org. So, okay, we'll get started for what we just read in Leviticus now. Okay, so we just read chapters 10, 11, and 12 of Leviticus. So we're now going to do the Bible study for Leviticus chapter 10, 11, and 12. So, Leviticus chapter 10 Bible study. What did Nadab and Abihu do at the altar in the presence of God? Nadab and Abihu offered unauthorized incense on a censer to God. What happened to them? God killed them. What did this show that God expects of us? God is to be worshipped. He is holy. God is holy and is to be worshipped according to his way. This brings honor and glory to God, not us. Of what were Aaron and his sons not to partake? The priests were not to partake of any intoxicating drink when they went into the tabernacle of meeting. Why were they not to partake of this? The priests needed to be able to discern between the clean and the unclean, the holy and the unholy, and be able to teach the children of Israel all the statutes of the Lord. All right, so that was the Bible study for Leviticus chapter 10, and we're now going to start the Bible study for Leviticus chapter 11. Leviticus chapter 11 Bible study. What type of animals could the children of Israel eat? The people could eat animals that had split hooves and also chewed the cud. What type of water creatures could the children of Israel eat? Of those in the water, the people could eat those with both fins and scales in the seas or river. In general, what types of birds were not allowed to be eaten? Birds that ate flesh, carnivores, could not be eaten. What was required if the people touched any unclean animal or the carcass of any unclean thing? If they touched an unclean animal or the carcass of an unclean animal, the people had to wash their garments and would be unclean till evening. If an unclean thing fell into an earthen vessel, what had to be done to the vessel? An earthen vessel must be destroyed and whatever was in it. If they touched the carcass of a clean animal, what were they to do? If they touched the carcass of a clean animal, they would have to wash their clothes and be unclean until evening. Excuse me. Sorry. Could the people eat of the creeping thing or that which crawled on its belly? The people could not eat of the creeping things or that which crawled on its belly. Okay, so that was the Bible study for Leviticus chapter 11, and now we're going to start the Bible study for Leviticus chapter 12. Leviticus chapter 12 Bible study. How long would a woman be unclean after having a son? A woman would be unclean for 7 days after having a son. What was done to the son on the 8th day after he was born? A son was circumcised on the 8th day after he was born. What was the length of the mother's purification period? The mother's purification period was 33 days. If a woman had a daughter, how long would she be unclean? A woman would be unclean 14 days after having a daughter. What was the length of the mother's purification after having a daughter? The mother's purification period was 66 days after having a daughter. All right. And that was the Bible study for Leviticus chapter 12. So we did the Bible studies for everything that we read today of the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 10, 11, and 12. And then we just did the Bible studies for them. Now we're going to go on over to the New Testament and read Matthew chapter 26, verse 1 through 19. And we're not going to do any Bible study for that. What we read of Matthew 26, we're going to wait until we finish Matthew chapter 26. We're not going to finish tomorrow, because they split ESV.org splits the Matthew chapter 26 into 3 days. So on not tomorrow but the next day we'll do the Bible study for the entire Matthew chapter 26. Okay. Matthew chapter 26. Only verse 1 through 19, though. The plot to kill Jesus. When Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and plotted together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar." Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people. Jesus anointed at Bethany. Now, when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head, and he reclined at table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. And pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Judas to betray Jesus. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he sought an opportunity to betray him. The Passover with the disciples. Now, on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' And the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover." All right, so that was Matthew chapter 26, verse 1 through 19. And one second, let me check this just to make sure there wasn't like a mistake on there. Oh, okay, so yeah, it's right. So yeah, it's split up into 3 days. So yes, today we read Matthew 26, verse 1 through 19. Tomorrow we'll read verse 20 through 54. And then the next day we'll read verse 55 through 75. And that'll finish Matthew chapter 26. And then we'll do the Bible study for the entire Matthew chapter 26. So we're not going to do it today and like split it up as I do, because when I finally finish it, I always like go back over on the last day of reading what we read the day before. So just, I'm not going to do that anymore. So I'll just wait until we finish the entire chapter of Matthew, chapter 26. So yes, just a recap of what we did today. We read Leviticus chapter 10, 11, and 12 of the Old Testament. And after reading Leviticus chapter 10, 11, and 12, we did a Bible study for Leviticus chapter 10, 11, and 12. And then we went on over to the New Testament and we read Matthew chapter 26, verse 1 through 19. And we're not going to do a Bible study for that, what we just read, just because ESV.org on their schedule, they split Matthew chapter 26 up until 3 days. So I'm just going to stick to their schedule, and then I'll do the Bible study for Matthew chapter 26 once we finish on the third day of finishing Matthew chapter 26. So yes, but we're almost done with Matthew, the book of Matthew. We have, once we finish, if they weren't like split up so many days, then we would have been done. But yes, so we have only 2 chapters left of Matthew, the book of Matthew. It only goes up to Matthew chapter 28. But it's going to take us like a week maybe to finish the book of Matthew, just because of how it's split up, the chapters. So I think they do that because it's more books of the Bible in the Old Testament. So, you know, the Old Testament, we're on the 3rd book of the Old Testament now. We've read Genesis, Exodus. Now we just started Leviticus like 3 days ago. So we're knocking out the Old Testament, but the New Testament, we're still on the 1st book after 41 days. And it's just because I'm following ESV.org schedule. And yeah, but we're going to finish both the Old Testament and the New Testament on the same day. Once we get to day 365, we'll be finishing both the Old Testament and the New Testament on the same day. So they split it up like that so that it can happen that way. So yes, day 41 is complete. We made it through 40 days. Wow, like 40 days, 40 nights, like 40 days is like, it's a very important number in the Bible. So we made it through, and it doesn't even seem like it's been 41 days. So this year is going to go by like really fast. So, but we're doing it. So I'm so excited for our growth within this year. And yes, that is it for today. I love you. God loves you. You matter. You are worthy. You are valuable. And you are enough. And never let anyone tell you anything different. And don't like lessen yourself for anyone either. Just be yourself and let your light shine. And it doesn't matter like how anyone treats you or what anyone thinks about you or what they have to say about what you do or anything. Like, just keep living your life. How someone else thinks of you is not your problem. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. So don't worry yourself with anyone else's thoughts. And yes, continue to love everyone and stay you and stay beautiful, and God loves you and so do I. And I'll see you tomorrow for day 42. And remember, it's never luck, it's always God. So I love you. See you tomorrow.